Hi Gomes graduates and happy Monday. Today we are going to be talking about the new MyOn project and some skills that we need to just review so that we can achieve a sense of mastery on this project. So continuing with our theme, we're going to go through the time of the Underground Railroad that we did last week, and we're going to move on to talking about the Civil War. So you have two books to read for this week. One of them is called The Battle Over Slavery, and the other one is Voices of the Civil War. Now, The Battle Over Slavery is a cause and effect book, so it talks about the causes of the Civil War and the effects. The Voices of the Civil War is actually a really cool book, and it gives you a first-person perspective and stories about people during the Civil War. So there are people such as, I have to look at my list, there's a Confederate soldier, there's a Confederate doctor, and there's also Union Marines, Union colonels, we have Rangers, and you also get to hear the story from a freed slave. So this book has a bunch of different layers that'll help you get a better understanding of the Civil War and kind of what the relationships were like. And relationships are really what we're going to focus on for this week. So we are going to focus primarily on the relationship between the people of the northern states and the people of the southern states. So let's do a quick review of just kind of what the Civil War was and how we're going to approach it regarding the relationship aspect. So the Civil War started in April 1861 and went until April 1865, and it was it actually is the bloodiest battle that happened on American soil. So there were approximately 620,000 to 750,000 Americans who were killed during this war. And even though the country's population was very small then, that's a lot of people. And the reason we don't know the exact number of people who died was because there were so many things that weren't documented during this war. And there were also a lot of civilian deaths. So deaths that weren't by soldiers, they were just by everyday people because of complications of the war. So this war was something that was a really big deal in America and continues to be a really big deal today. As mentioned before, the Civil War was fought from 1861 to 1865 between the North and the South. Now, the North called themselves the Union, so those blue states were known as the Union states. They were states who did not believe that slavery should exist, and in those states, slavery was illegal. The purple are the Southern states, also known as the Confederate states, and they created their own government to oppose the rest of the country. So they were fighting to separate from the rest of the United States and become their own independent country where slavery was allowed. Now, a lot of these states in the South relied on slaves on plantations in order to make money, and money was a really big factor to them. Those yellow states are territories. They were not part of the United States yet. Officially, they weren't official states, but the land did belong to the United States. But in those territories, slavery really wasn't a factor, so it didn't really matter whether slavery was legal or illegal. So those states were kind of just central, and they were just kind of hanging out there. So they really weren't involved in any of the conflict. So for this MyOn project, there are the same three components. You have a reading piece, a graphic organizer, and then you have a writing portion. But you're actually going to do them in a little bit different order for this. So what you have is you're going to have a KWLS chart. Then you're going to read the stories. Then you're going to go back and finish your chart. And then you're going to do the writing component. So let's stop for a second and take a quick review. So this KWL chart is something similar to what you're going to see on your MyOn project while you're working on it. And the first thing that you need to do for this project is fill out these first two sections. So the K, what you know, and the W, what you want to know. And in these two boxes, you're going to put information regarding the Civil War. So for the K, what you know, you're going to put what you think you know about the Civil War before you actually read the books. For the W, you're going to put what you want to know about the Civil War. So maybe some questions that you have, some things that you think might be interesting to learn, and fill those two sections out before you read. Once you finish the first two sections of the KWL chart, you're going to read the two books titled Voices of the Civil War and The Battle Over Slavery. After you have finished reading, you're going to fill out the last two parts of your KWL chart. The L, what you've learned, and the S, what you still want to learn. So in the L, you're going to put important pieces of information that you now know about the Civil War based off of what you read in the books. And this should be the column that has the most information in it because you're reading two books about the Civil War. So figure out the most important pieces of information and include that in what you've learned. For the S, you are going to put questions you might still have about the Civil War or questions you might have now that you've read. Maybe you gathered some information as you were reading, but you want to know even more about that. Those are the kind of things that you're going to put in the S column of this KWLS chart.
So it's really important to think about the relationships that are happening in this book. During the Civil War, there were families divided. You had some families who had sons fighting for the Confederate side, for slavery, and then you had some families who were fighting for the Union side to end slavery. So it wasn't just this battle between states or between armies. A lot of the time in the Civil War, there were battles actually within the families themselves. So when we're thinking about the Civil War and looking at the relationships, you have to think about how this tension between North and South, these arguments and the disagreements really helped result in a war that was about more than just slavery. It was about differences of ideas and differences of opinions. So as you read, think about the types of differences that you notice between the North and the South, especially when you're reading the different perspectives from the book, The Voices of the Civil War. In the next video, we're going to talk a lot about how to create the writing component. So for right now, what you should be focusing on is working on the two parts, the KW part for your graphic organizer, reading the two texts, and then going back and filling out the last two parts of your graphic organizer. On Wednesday, when we release the next video, that's when we're really going to focus on the writing question and how to best answer it. So definitely make sure that you're making progress towards this project and towards the past week's projects if those aren't done yet. Keep working hard, and we can't wait to see what you guys all come up with.